Have you ever heard of a family so cursed that every woman who entered its doors slowly lost her mind? The story of the Dunham family is not one whispered lightly. It is a tale drenched in madness, shadows, and secrets buried beneath polished smiles. 5 wives bound by fate to the same household, each one unraveling in ways more chilling than the last. Was it the house itself, the man they married, or something far darker lurking in the bloodline? Tonight we unlock the macabre mystery of the Dunham family, where love turned into lunacy. Welcome to a world where forgotten families, dark secrets, and chilling mysteries come alive. Here, every story hides a curse, every house whispers a secret, and every family has a shadow that refuses to fade. If you're drawn to tales of madness, betrayal, and the macabre, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and step with us into the haunting world of disturbing family stories. But be warned, once you enter, there's no turning back. The Dunham estate stood tall on the edge of Willow Creek, a house that seemed to breathe with secrets. Its white paint had long faded into a sickly yellow, and the shutters groaned whenever the wind passed through. Locals avoided the narrow road that led to its iron gates, swearing they had seen shadows move across the windows, even when the house was supposed to be empty. But the house was never truly empty. It carried with it the echoes of screams, the whispers of prayers, and the faint, lingering scent of lavender mixed with dust. This was where the Dunham family built their legacy, a legacy that would soon turn into a nightmare. At the center of it all was Jonathan Dunham, a man respected in public but feared in private. To outsiders, he was a successful merchant with charm and wealth. But those who stepped inside his home quickly learned that his charm was only a mask. Jonathan believed in control, over his fortune, over his children, and most of all, over his wives. The first Mrs. Dunham entered the house with dreams of grandeur. She was young, hopeful, and unaware of the darkness waiting for her. At first, neighbors noticed her glowing smile, her lively walks into town. But slowly, something began to change. She stopped speaking in the market. Her eyes darted nervously, as though someone was always watching. And within a year, her laughter had disappeared altogether, replaced by silence and vacant stares. Whispers spread. Some said Jonathan was cruel. Others swore the house itself was cursed. The woman's mind unraveled like fragile thread, until one day she vanished from sight, locked away in her room, never seen in town again. The townsfolk pretended not to notice. But behind closed doors they whispered, "The Dunham wives never last," and that was only the beginning. When the first Mrs. Dunham faded into silence, Jonathan wasted no time. Within months, whispers spread through Willow Creek that he had taken another wife. The townsfolk watched with uneasy curiosity, wondering how any woman could step into a house already marked with madness. Her name was Eleanor, a woman of striking beauty and delicate manners, the daughter of a wealthy landowner from across the state. Unlike Jonathan's first wife, Eleanor carried herself with confidence, as though she were immune to the fears that haunted the townspeople. When she arrived at the estate, dressed in pale silk and carrying a hopeful smile, many thought she might be the one to break the curse. At first, her presence lit the old house in a way no one expected. Music drifted from the drawing room as she played the piano. The windows, once shrouded by heavy curtains, were opened to let the light in. Even the servants seemed to walk with less fear in their steps. For a moment, the Dunham house looked like a home again. But Willow Creek had long memories. The locals remembered the first wife's decline, and they watched Eleanor closely. They noticed the way Jonathan's grip tightened on her arm during church gatherings, how his smile seemed to stretch a little too wide when anyone else spoke to her. Rumors whispered that he forbade her from visiting town without him. As weeks passed, Eleanor's sparkle began to dim. Neighbors saw her wandering the gardens alone at night, her eyes hollow, her hands trembling as though she were listening to voices no one else could hear. Once, a servant claimed to have found her standing in front of a cracked mirror, whispering words in a language no one recognized. Then came the screams. They echoed through the estate at odd hours, sometimes in the dead of night, sometimes at dawn. The townsfolk living closest to the house swore they could hear her cries carried by the wind. But no one dared to knock on the Dunham gates, and yet Jonathan acted as if nothing was wrong. He appeared in town, polished and smiling, claiming his wife was simply unwell. Eleanor stopped appearing at his side, and soon she too was gone from the public eye. 2 wives. two minds lost within the walls of the Dunham house. By now the town no longer whispered. It spoke in fearful certainty. The Dunham family was cursed, and any woman who became Jonathan's bride was doomed to fall into madness. But the most disturbing truth was this: Jonathan was not finished searching for another. Because, for reasons no one understood, the house always demanded more. By the time Jonathan Dunham brought home his third wife, the whispers in Willow Creek had turned into warnings. No woman with sense would enter that house, they said, and yet there she was. Margaret, dressed in a striking blue gown, her eyes bright with the innocence of someone untouched by tragedy. Margaret was different from the others. She was outspoken, intelligent, and unafraid to challenge Jonathan in ways no one had dared before. Some claimed she had married him for his wealth. Others believed she pitied the widower and wished to bring light back into the cursed halls of the estate. Whatever her reason, she walked into the Dunham house as though she could tame its darkness. For a time it seemed as though she might succeed. Jonathan's grip appeared looser, almost softened, as if Margaret's stubborn spirit had subdued him. Servants whispered that she laughed in his face when he tried to command her. She filled the dining hall with flowers, demanded that the doors remain open to the sunlight, and even invited neighbors for tea. The townsfolk, though hesitant, began to hope. Perhaps this woman could break the cycle, but the Dunham house had other plans. It began in subtle ways. The flowers Margaret arranged withered overnight, their petals blackened as though touched by fire. Guests invited for tea claimed to feel a sudden chill in the parlor, even when the hearth blazed. One neighbor swore she heard a child's voice crying from the upstairs nursery. Though the Dunhams had no child, Margaret herself began to change. At church, her boldness faltered. Her hands shook when she tried to play the hymns on the organ. In town, she stared off into the distance, speaking to no one in particular. A shopkeeper recalled her whispering, "The walls are listening," before hurriedly leaving without her purchase. Then there was the matter of the blue dress. It had been her favorite, the gown she wore the day she entered the Dunham estate. But soon she refused to take it off. Servants reported that she wandered the halls in it day and night, muttering to herself. Her once bright eyes grew dark, sunken, haunted by sleepless nights. One stormy evening, a maid heard Margaret screaming from the master bedroom. When she rushed to the door, she found it locked. Jonathan's voice thundered from inside, demanding silence. The next morning, Margaret appeared at breakfast, her blue dress torn at the hem, her face scratched as though by fingernails. But she said nothing. She ate nothing. She only stared at her plate with an empty smile. The town soon noticed her absence. No more visits, no more invitations, no more bold laughter in the market square. Margaret had vanished into the same silence that consumed the two wives before her. But unlike the others, the people of Willow Creek claimed they still saw her. Late at night, passers-by swore they caught sight of a woman in a tattered blue gown standing at the window of the Dunham estate. Her face pale, her eyes hollow, watching the road below. When lightning split the sky, she would vanish, leaving only the reflection of shadows against the glass. 3 wives. 3 women who entered the Dunham home with hope, only to be swallowed by madness. The town no longer debated whether it was Jonathan's cruelty or the house itself. They believed both man and mansion were cursed, bound together in something unholy. And yet, Jonathan's hunger for companionship was unquenched. He was a man who would not, or could not, live without a wife. And so, despite the rumors, despite the terror, despite the trail of broken minds left behind him, Jonathan began to search once more, because the Dunham curse was not finished. Not yet. By the time Jonathan Dunham brought home his 4th wife, the town of Willow Creek no longer greeted him with polite nods or forced smiles. People crossed the street when he approached, mothers pulled their children closer, and the pastor himself refused to shake his hand. Jonathan, however, seemed unaffected. He arrived one autumn evening in a fine carriage, his coat crisp, his posture unshaken, and beside him sat a new bride, Clara Whitmore. Clara was unlike the wives before her. She was not a wide-eyed girl or a wealthy daughter pushed into marriage. She was a widow, a woman who had known grief, who had buried a husband before. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, her eyes carried wisdom, and she had the kind of presence that made people stop and listen when she spoke. Many in town whispered that perhaps Clara, strong and seasoned by life, could withstand whatever darkness lingered in the Dunham home. From the moment she stepped inside, Clara knew something was wrong. The air felt heavy, as though the walls themselves were pressing inward. The portraits of Dunham ancestors seemed to follow her with their painted eyes. At night, she swore she heard footsteps pacing outside her door, though Jonathan insisted it was just the old house settling. But Clara had lived in old houses before, and she knew the difference between creaking wood and deliberate steps. Unlike the wives before her, Clara refused to let the house consume her quietly. When the flowers withered overnight, she replaced them with fresh ones each morning, daring the house to strike again. When whispers echoed through the halls, she spoke back, sometimes in prayer, sometimes in anger. Servants whispered that she carried a rosary in her pocket at all times, her fingers brushing over the beads whenever she felt the shadows draw too near. Jonathan, of course, grew restless with her defiance. He had chosen Clara for her strength, believing it might complement his own, but instead, he found himself challenged in ways that unsettled him. She questioned his decisions, argued when he tried to control her movements, and demanded that the locked doors of the upper floor be opened. Jonathan refused, his voice rising in fury. "Some rooms are not meant to be disturbed," he warned. But Clara was not a woman easily silenced. The townsfolk began to hear rumors of shouting matches echoing from the estate. Servants, too frightened to speak openly, whispered that Jonathan's mask of charm was slipping, and the real man beneath, the cruel, controlling tyrant, was showing himself more each day. Yet Clara stood her ground. She attended church without him, visited neighbors when she pleased, and even dared to speak of the curse of the Dunham house aloud, something no one else had ever done. But bravery has its price. One night, during a violent thunderstorm, Clara vanished from her room. The servant searched the house, calling her name, but found only the rosary she carried, abandoned on the staircase. Hours later, Jonathan appeared, soaked to the bone, claiming Clara had taken ill and was being kept in private. No one saw her again in town, and yet, strange things began to happen in Willow Creek. Neighbors swore they saw a woman standing at the edge of the estate's iron gates, her silver-streaked hair blowing in the wind, her lips moving in silent prayer. Others claimed they heard her voice carried on the storm, chanting words that made their blood run cold. Some even believed she was trying to warn them, that Clara, unlike the others, had not gone quietly into madness, but was fighting still, even in death. The house itself seemed to rage against her presence. Windows shattered without cause, fires sparked in the hearths unbidden, and the air grew so heavy with dread that even Jonathan began to look over his shoulder. For the first time, it appeared that the Dunham estate had met resistance, and it was furious. Clara's defiance left a mark. Though Jonathan locked her away, though her body was never seen again, her spirit, or perhaps her will, remained. Servants whispered of seeing her figure in the long hallway, clutching her rosary, her lips moving in silent defiance. Unlike the wives before her, Clara did not vanish into silence. She became a part of the house itself, a presence that challenged the darkness rather than surrendering to it. But the curse was not broken. If anything, it had deepened. For with Clara's disappearance, the estate grew more hostile, its hunger more insatiable. The people of Willow Creek avoided the property altogether, convinced that the Dunham family had crossed a line no one should dare cross. Still, Jonathan was relentless. Whether driven by arrogance, madness, or something darker, he could not live without a wife. And so, even as the fourth woman was consumed by the estate, Jonathan prepared to bring home yet another bride. 5 wives, the townsfolk whispered. 5 women must be taken before the Dunham curse is fed. But if Clara's resistance had taught them anything, it was this. The curse might not only consume the wives, it might one day consume them all.